So it's fall time in Zone 9A, and today we're going to plant some onions. We're going to cover all the basics of what you need to do to have a great onion harvest. So let's get started. So growing onions in Zone 9A is fairly easy. There's a couple things we need to keep in mind. The first and foremost, we need to consider soil. We want to make sure that we have a nice, loose soil. Loose soil is really important because we're growing a bulb, so we need to have something that isn't going to inhibit the bulb from forming. And if we've got compacted soil, then root crops like onions, carrots, and similar items might have a little bit difficult time reaching their maximum potential. What we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of time to come in and break up clumps like this and the top layer where it might have dried out over time, just making sure we've got loose soil and that our plant can form great roots. We're also going to be looking for any kind of weeds. Onions don't like competition, so it's very important to make sure that we keep this bed completely weeded, and we'll use mulch, a new fresh layer later on. As you can see, we've got some old pine straw in here, and that's okay. It's just organic matter. It's going to break down, but for now, we're just going to leave it. That's some old weeds. We'll pull that out. We just want to make sure this is nice and loose. So onions grow when the length of day is short and the temperatures are cool here in Zone 9A or Southeast Texas. So we need to make sure that we're choosing a short day onion variety. Today we're going to be putting some Texas early whites down. You know, these look kind of scraggly, but it's okay. As long as the bulb on the bottom is firm, these green tops will come back. So we're a little behind on planting at the time of making this video, but that's quite all right. We can still get a decent harvest, and we're going to fill this bed up with onions. So short day onions can get quite large. Some of the sweet onions, like the Texas 1015 super sweets, those are the most popular. They can get about the size of a softball. The Texas early whites can get pretty large, but a lot of times we'll see the whites be a little bit smaller. One thing to keep in mind when you're choosing what variety that you want out of the short day varieties, the sweeter the onion, the shorter the shelf life. And that's because a sweeter onion has more water content, whereas a more pungent onion, sometimes your whites, they're going to have a longer shelf life. So first thing we want to do, you can see this guy here doesn't really have any green tops on it, but we still got a lot of bulb left. It's nice and it's firm. No issue. We're going to take and we're going to plant it 3/4 to 1 inch deep. So we can get real technical with it if we want. I use my Vigo Hori Hori knife here. It does have some measurements on there, so if I hadn't done this before, I can get a little bit of an idea. The papery portion, if it still has green tops on it, is going to stick out. If we want to grow these to their full potential, we need to plant them at 6 to 8 inch spacings. Now we could plant them closer. By planting them closer, what's going to happen is the bulb is going to get smaller essentially, and that's all right. If you're like me, I'm not particularly fond of lots of onion. The flavor is irreplaceable in the culinary world, and it's an amazing flavor, but the texture for some people is not favorable. So for us, we don't like to use very large onions. We don't put as much as some others might. So we're okay with having a little bit tighter spacing, because we might grow a smaller onion and we might use all that onion in one sitting. So really plant it to your specifications, but you don't want to overcrowd it. If you want smaller onions, maybe 4 inches, but probably no closer than that. So I'm going to use my little knife here for spacing. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll lay these out on the soil ahead of time, so I can kind of have a better idea of where I want to plant them, and I can get the most out of my space. So here we've got these spaced about 6 inches apart, using our knife as a measure here. You could get really technical if you're planting these in a long straight bed, and you could use a tape measure and line it out, spacing them perfectly. So you can see here, it's not planted very deep. If you plant it too deep, then you can actually inhibit the growth of the bulb. I'm going to continue to plant these out. A little too close, so we'll move it. If I didn't mention, if you're planting in a raised bed, be mindful of the sidewall. You don't want to get too close to that, because again, that can also be something that can stop the onion from growing to its full potential. So let's talk a little bit about onion varieties. So you mentioned onions grow when the temps are cool in correlation with the length of day. So in the south, we want a short day onion. We need onions that will grow in a shorter time period because we have a shorter cool season than a lot of other areas, and our days are very short here. So short day varieties for the southern region. There's also an intermediate day onion. It's going to grow in the middle United States. And then there's a long day onion, which will grow up north, where the days typically can be longer in the cool season or whenever those particular varieties are planted. I'm not super familiar with whenever you might plant onions in the north, so it could maybe be a different time of year. But it all relates to length of day and cool temperatures. So short day onion needs about 8 to 10 hours of sunlight, or an intermediate day will be, I think, 10 to 12. And a long day onion could be 12 to 14 hours of sunlight, maybe even slightly longer on each variety. So timing is important. So we want to get these guys in the ground in November, usually from our supplier, Dixondale Farms here in Texas. The first crop will be ready 1 to 2 weeks prior to Thanksgiving. We want to get those in the ground as soon as possible, because our main goal in growing onions is to get as large of green tops as possible, because those tops are going to help us create the bulb. So we've got our onions spaced out about 6 inches apart. Some of them may be a little some of them slightly closer. And like I said before, some of these tops are a little scraggly. That's okay. The next step that we're going to take is we're going to feed these guys. So onions are heavy nitrogen feeders. In the beginning, we're focusing all of our energy on growing these green tops. And as we know, most green growth comes from nitrogen, which is quickly used up. So we're going to supply nitrogen, preferably a organic source. You know, we like to grow food naturally as possible, making sure that we're eating healthy and we're putting good things to use in the kitchen. So with that, most of your organic fertilizers is going to be lower in nitrogen than what you might find and what's recommended in a lot of onion planting guides, which will be synthetic fertilizer like ammonium sulfate or calcium nitrate. Those are going to be much faster acting, much higher potency. But for us, if you listen back to any of our previous content, we're always very focused on the soil. We want to make sure that we're being stewards of the soil and putting good things in and creating a living ecosystem within our soil, so that each time we return, we're putting less inputs in and the soil actually maintains itself over a long period of time. It's not an easy thing to obtain, but it can happen. So today we're going to apply Microlife's 846 vegetable and flower. We're usually going to use about a half cup per square foot of garden space. We're not going to get super technical with it. We're going to give this a good shake and make sure that we've got plenty of fertilizer down before we give it a good watering in. I'm going to lightly work this back into the soil. Ideally, I should have probably done this before I planted to make things easier, but sometimes your brain doesn't work like you think it does. The only reason I want to do that is just to help keep it from moving and floating off, helping stay evenly distributed through the bed. But again, not that big of a deal. So onions have a lot of water content in them. So it's really important that we provide consistent water, usually through the vegetative state where we're growing mostly green tops. We want to be focused on providing about 1 inch of water per week. Whenever the plant actually begins to bulb and the onion starts to form, you could be using anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of water. So you want to be mindful. Sometimes this time of year it can be fairly wet. We might be getting quite a bit of rain. Just depends. So be mindful. Stick your hand in the dirt. Ensure that there's moisture there. Don't overwater, because we are growing root crop, and too much moisture can cause the onion to rot. So you want to make sure that we're actually utilizing our water to the best of our ability. So we always like to water at the soil level. This soil is actually already kind of damp. The dew has been really heavy lately, and the moisture content in the soil is pretty good. But I'm going to add a minimal amount of water here just to help activate this Microlife fertilizer. And ensure that our onions get a little bit of a drink to start out. For all subsequent waterings, we want to make sure that we're doing a deep watering. So I'm going to water this bed probably about once a week. And I'm going to water it nice and deep so that the water stays consistent. And I'll check it throughout the week just in case. The temperatures this time of year are usually moderate. Right now it's still pretty warm and it's humid. So there's no telling how the water will stay in the soil this time of year. So one of the most important things, because an onion is primarily water, is moisture retention. So that's where our mulch layer will come into effect. I'm going to give this several days and let these kind of come back to life, since they were kind of stressed and some of the tops are yellowing. I'm going to let them begin to put on some new green tops, and then I'm going to come back in with a fresh layer of pine straw. And that's going to help, number one, keep the weeds out. As we said before, onions don't like competition. They need to be weed free for the best results, and it's going to help us maintain moisture. Now, a couple things that might happen along the way. Onions we find to be typically insect and disease free overall, but if you don't have them spaced properly and your environment is not like this where it's out in the open and airflow is really good, you could experience blight or purple blotch disease. Although I've never actually run into these personally in all my years of growing onions, but they are something that can happen. And thrips are a type of insect that onions can be subject to. Again, I've not ever come up with that. For me, the key to growing insect free vegetables and fruits is sticking to a living soil, and ideally an organic or natural system. While it can't take care of all pests, it's a great foundation for allowing your plants to have its own natural defenses and immune system, just like we do. So onions are going to take about 100 to 120 days to mature. So we've got a while before these really provide us anything. So we're going to continually feed them. They need lots of nitrogen up until about mid to late January. So we're going to be providing extra nitrogen through fish emulsion, so liquid nitrogen, non-burning. We can spray the foliage or the green tops of these, and it can absorb the nitrogen through the leaves, or we can use it in a watering can as one of our waterings to ensure that we're continually supplying that nitrogen. So while these are not bulbing onions, these are essentially leeks, and there are some multiplying onions in here. I want to show you these because you can see the vigor and the amount of green tops. This is kind of what we're going for our bulbing onions, because what's going to happen when the bulb begins to form, all the energy that's stored in these green leaves are going to begin to transfer down and form the bulb. So we focus on green top growth first. This is going to in turn feed the base, which will turn into the bulb. So that's about it for growing onions. Stay tuned as we watch these particular Texas early whites grow, and then we'll follow back up with more videos on how we supplement nitrogen, how we harvest and cure them, and lastly how we store them. So thanks for watching. See you next time.